Good morning and welcome to the second episode of Don't Be a Bad Boss. I reached out to some of you because I wanted to get some guests to come on my show and talk about their experiences with managers in their life. What kind of managers they had, why did they leave organizations, what could those managers could have done different. And that's why I decided to name the show Don't Be a Bad Boss that people quit on. And in these shows we'll be teaching you what are some skills that you need to develop and master as a leader, as a supervisor, as a manager. My name is Anya Soto. I am in training and development with Civility Partners. We do a lot of trainings around manager skills. What are some skills that you need to develop? And today I wanted to share with you inclusive meetings. What makes meetings inclusive? And again, as someone who's been training and coaching for the past decade almost now, since 2011, yeah, it is kind of a decade. Wow. Since 2011, I think I have a couple of tips that I'd like to share with you. Let me go ahead, and if you're joining me live, please say hello and introduce yourself. And I'm curious, what makes meetings inclusive? How do you know when meetings are inclusive? I think with COVID and we're looking at managers, our clients have teams all over the world. They're remote, nobody's in the office. So we missed out on that opportunity to just walk into someone's office and be like, hey, I just want to check in with you, or invite someone, right, to come to the meeting or stop by and have water or coffee, have a conversation in the elevator. So we have to put so much more effort in creating that inclusion and engagement in our meetings. And people are attending, from different walks of life, and someone just dropped off their kid, and someone else just had their dentist appointment, and someone else was in calls nonstop and is just joining us. So hi, Steve. Steve has said, hi, Anya. So if you're watching it live or if you're watching a recording, I would love to hear what makes meetings inclusive. When would you say that was not an inclusive meeting? Or when would you say, oh, wow, that leader was really inclusive? So I wanted to share with you Trust is a big element of creating inclusion in organizations, right? Trust and psychological safety. Last week, I did an amazing workshop with a leadership team with an ad agency. It's a big marketing agency. Again, they have remote teams. And we talked about a trust between individuals versus psychological safety, where it's a behavior between the group of people. And why it's important, because I might trust someone on my team, but I don't trust other people. And that decreases the psychological safety. Why is it relevant to meetings? Because if I don't trust team members, I'm not going to engage. I'm not going to make comments. I'm not going to post my opinions. I'm not going to express my opinion or my thoughts or contribute my ideas or innovate. So we're always working on building trust between people that will then contribute. It's like, okay, great. Like, I feel like people trust each other, but now how do we build that trust and psychological safety as a group together? So I wanted to bring this up and say, if you do not have trust and psychological safety, it will be really hard to engage your people. And when we talk about inclusion, again, people don't feel included, and you build trust through one-on-one meetings. I did a whole session on trust last week, so you can go back and listen to the recording. How do you build trust? How do you build psychological safety on a team? So I'm going to talk about building the container. So quickly, I see leaders just jump into tasks, right? We have our Monday meeting. It's all hands meeting. Okay, let's report who is doing what happened. Take 5 minutes to build the connection before tasks, because again, that creates psychological safety. That creates a feeling like I have a team. I'm not just here, right, to deliver on the results. And people often, managers say like, I don't have time. We just need to dive into tasks. But I guarantee if you spend 5 minutes building connection, you'll spend way less time organizing and managing tasks, because people will do it for you. Because when people, again, love each other, trust each other, feel like they're a team and feel a connection, they're more likely to contribute, they're more likely to engage, they're more likely to step in and help each other. Steve said, having led a large multinational pharma business unit, it's incumbent on the leader to create a safe, non-judgmental environment. Yeah, I gave last week. Thank you, Steve. Steve and I know each other from coaching training many, many, many years ago. So I'm so happy to see your face and hear your comments. You've been always such a supporter of my work. And I respect you so much, and you are so good at creating those safe spaces, even in person. I've never experienced you online, but in person you were always very inclusive and welcoming. Someone who is an immigrant, someone who walks in with my androgynous looks and my accent, sometimes I don't feel on the inside. But that's a whole other LinkedIn Live. So thanks, Steve. Just wanted to, again, acknowledge the comment. If you're asking people for comments and someone puts a comment, this is a great example of acknowledge the comment. Because if a leader says, okay, guys, I want to know, what do you all think? Like, put some ideas in the chat, and then people put ideas in the chat, and okay, let's move on. What's next on our slide? Nobody will put ideas next time. Acknowledge people. So let's go back to building the container. Make sure that everyone knows each other. I see that a lot in meetings. A couple of people know each other, but there's someone new, and we just go on and we're like, okay, let's move into the meeting. And that one person or a couple of people are like, I don't know what the names are. I don't know what the roles are. I don't know where the titles are. Give me some context. Who is in the meeting? Who is invited into the meeting? And also make sure you introduce people. Last week, again, I gave an analogy, a metaphor, and I love this metaphor. If someone comes to your house and you have a dinner party, and most people know each other, but there are a couple of new people, wouldn't you introduce them to everybody else at the table? Or would you be like, okay, who wants what for, their dessert? You will make sure that people know each other. It's the same thing. As a leader, as a manager, this is your space. Your meeting is your living room. You're responsible for bullying, for harassment, for comments, if they happen to address them. You're responsible for introducing people. You're responsible to run an agenda, to be on time. You're the host of this container, of this meeting. That's why we say build the container, take the time and hear from everybody. If you have the same three people chatting and making comments and, adding their ideas, and then there are a couple of people that you never hear from, it's a problem, right? How do you make sure you hear from everybody? And I'll give you some tips and tools how to engage everybody. So then we start going into like, okay, what are different personality types, right? Who is the left brain? Who is the right brain? Because if you want to be an inclusive leader, I want you to include everybody. What does it look like? People who have more of a left brain develop, right? They want lists and bullets and points and agendas and relevance. They crave structure. The right brain wants images, metaphors, laughs, energy, colors. They don't operate. So how do you create both, right? So when we design trainings, we always think, okay, how do we design a training where there'll be different opportunities for different people to contribute so that it's engaging, but it's also structural? Because I can speak, and some people, for an example, right? Some people receive their auditory and they love just hearing me speak. Others need the same thing on a computer. They need to read. That's how they understand. Other people need to be in a conversation. Someone else needs to take notes. So creating those opportunities for people to learn and participate in different ways. So that is one, right? Always like thinking, okay, we need an agenda, and then we need fun. We need relevance, but then we need to maybe invite some people with like different images, or we need to have like, why do we say like have an icebreaker, right? Part of building the connection. Again, because it goes for people who need a little bit more engagement. They can't just go into the bullet points. And then I want you to start thinking about introverts and extroverts, right? I'm sure in your team, if you don't know if somebody is an introvert or an extrovert, this is a whole different conversation of like maybe start having one-on-ones. But you'll usually see them. And what I noticed in meetings where leaders would say, okay, who did what on a weekend? Put it in the chat quickly for me. And then, of course, a couple of people, like, they jump in, right? The extroverts, like, they speak on the fly, they think fast, they're outgoing, they're enthusiastic, they're all about, like, action-oriented, they just dive in, and then we move on. Introverts think before speaking. This is why introverts need time to deliver work. Sometimes you'll be like, okay, can I have this report in 2 hours? People that need time to think and space will not do good work. And this is where we start to acknowledge different personality types. We create opportunities to hear from both introverts and extroverts. They need to be seen too, but they're not going to be the one putting all attention on themselves. They love working independently. They do appear more reserved. So how do you manage them, right? Guess what? Extroverts are like, okay, show me how. So extroverts for you, I'm an extrovert, definitely. Maybe I'm becoming a little bit more introverted as I age. So give them the enthusiasm, give them the stimulation, allow them to multitask, allow them to like, blah, 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 tell them all of their ideas, put them in a chat. Like they're, again, see them as like, they're amazing. They need to contribute. They're the ones who create enthusiasm and engagement in your meetings. So you need to give them space to get it out of their system, because they're there on the chair being like, pick me, teacher. Like, I want to say, I want to share. So let them speak, let them share their ideas. Then create time and space for your introverts. Allow them time to think, speak, make decisions, ask them questions and say, hey, what are you thinking about this? And say, I'll give a couple of minutes for people to think about their answers. That's how you include people who need that time. I will now take a couple of minutes for people to put things in the chat. Respect their privacy. Don't call on them in big groups. Don't say, okay, let's hear from this person. If you know they don't like speaking in groups, that doesn't make them feel included. That makes them feel excluded. For them, and I'll show you some of the tools we utilize and use in our trainings for them, maybe you need to create private opportunities, anonymous opportunities to express their voices and opinions, right? And then listen. That's one lesson I keep learning over and over and over and over and over in my life. Listen when people share, listen when people talk, acknowledge their responses. So again, let's go back. Extroverts, get them out of the way. They want to show you enthusiasm. They need stimulation. They'll already be chatting and messaging and multitasking and checking email. Let them be themselves. But then create space and time for more introverted people. Don't call on them. Don't put them on the spot. They don't like that. Give them opportunities to express their voices privately or anonymously. And then, of course, we can't talk about inclusive meetings without talking about bias, unconscious bias. And people say, well, I'm not a racist. Look at me. I have a Black friend and I have a Black partner. We're not talking about conscious bias. Consciously, you're not a racist, but subconsciously, you might pull your purse just a little more tighter if you're sitting on the bus with a person of color next to you. It's subconscious. It's the messages. It's the upbringing and the segregation. It's all the things that we've heard our whole life. And I love this slide because it speaks to like politics. It's like someone says, oh, like my parents are, let's say, Republicans, right? You already make an assumption and you have a whole story of what it means to be raised by Republican parents, how close-minded they are, or how, like all these other things. I'm not going to put them out there. But it even goes for hair color. Someone shows up with gray hair. And you're like, that is interesting. Accents, neighborhood they grew up in. Just look at this slide. Isn't it insane? The tone of voice, right? Their style of clothing, their seniority, their color blindness, hobbies, their status. And again, we do whole training on unconscious bias and helping people, especially leaders, recognize where am I be biased? Where am I not calling on the people? Where am I not delegating tasks? Where I'm not involving them in some high visibility projects because one time they were late and I made an assumption that that wasn't situational, that was their personality trait, and now I don't trust them. So where are you biased? Where do you believe that, oh, maybe I believe that, all Asian descent people are good at math or they're shy? That is not true at all. So where are you generalizing, right? Based on social class, based on their the way they show up, based on what they've said. I've been in trainings where we would say, we do a lot of engagement, right? Workshops. And one of the questions was where employees, they were actually an intact team that worked together for, I don't know, maybe like 5-7 years, but I still remember that. and we put them in pairs and we were asking them questions. So let's say in high school your favorite music is, your favorite food is, like this is what you would do on the vacation if you were to retire. And this woman raised hand, and we said after a while, right, we're like, okay, who was like surprised by the answers? Who was really like engaged? And we're like, wow, that's what you think of me as your colleague? And this woman said, like, this guy said I listen to rock music, and like that is so not who I am. And I asked them, like, why did you say that after the exercise? And he was like, well, because like I remember 7 years ago you were dating this guy and you went to a concert. And she's like, oh my God, it's been like 7 years. My life changed so much. So it goes back to like how quickly we make assumptions based on comments. Someone went to a wedding that was in a certain neighborhood or a city or a town or a state, and we made up a whole story of what that means about that person. So remember, bias, unconscious bias and assumptions as a leader, we're always kind of like trying to uncover them, and they come into play hard in meetings. And so is for everybody else, right? Everyone else in that meeting also has assumptions about each other. Diane said, you can also put your icebreaker topics and questions in an agenda that you publish in advance so introverts have time to think and come to the meeting prepared. Yes, I love that, right? Such a simple thing. It's like, don't come up with it on the fly. Put it in the email and say, hey, guys, tomorrow in our meeting or 2 days from now in our meeting, here's what we're going to talk about. I love that example. Thank you. And anybody who is live listening, also put in your ideas. What do you do in your meetings? It's all about community learning. It's about peer learning. It's about learning from each other. There's so many things that I want to say, but I'm aware of the time. Here are a couple of examples I wanted to share because, again, we create a lot of engagement in our workshops because I don't want to just do slides. And we asked a group of people, there were 28 of them in that particular session, do you have to fit in and assimilate in order to feel included? And I love that 10 people said yes, 10 people said no, and 9 people said, I don't care, as long as you do your job, which again tells me that it's like, wow, this is an example of a leader who clearly is not an inclusive leader, who doesn't care about their people. And guess what? People will quit on a leader like this, right? It's like, as long as you do your job, well, I'm not a robot. I'm not a machine. Businesses are not machines. They're human systems. And then how do you react to conversations around diversity? Again, this is an example of an anonymous poll that we use in Zooms. I love polls. I love anonymous surveys because, again, we want to create, if we lack psychological safety or we have different personality types, we want to create opportunities for people to express themselves. I am not afraid to admit my mistakes versus I am afraid, right? How do you react to conversations? So this is just another example for you to ask questions and create engagement on your team. Here are some tools that we utilize. As I said, we use a lot of polls. So if you are a manager, supervisor, thinking of like, how can I make my meetings more interesting? I'm so tired myself. Like, I'm so bored. It's been, 2.5 years of Zoom meetings. Use polls because polls are anonymous. Use word clouds where it's like, okay, guys, let's see who is in what mood today. We love saying also put like 2 words or 2 emotions. I am tired and excited. I am exhausted and I'm hungry. I am curious and I am vulnerable today. And create a little word cloud. There are plenty of free tools there. This one, I think I was using, I know the last one, the live voting, I love using Mentimeter. And for word cloud, I think Mentimeter also has it, but there are plenty of tools. So that's another way, right? Instead of asking people to put it in the chat, same old question. How was your weekend? Because we talk a lot with leaders and they say, oh, you ask questions and then nobody says anything. And then I ask them a question in the chat and nobody says, like, create some interaction. They can do it on their phones. You can put a little QR code and say, hey, screen this. Scan your QR code and add a couple of words that come to mind when you think about our team. If you, there's so many fun questions, just make it interactive. And then I also love live voting, especially when it comes to making decisions. because the loudest people in the room will usually take over. So it's like live voting is a cool, and it's live, and you can share your screen and say, hey, let's add some ideas. Here are like 5 questions. What do you think should be the priority for Q2? And see what different people are saying. Because again, often they will not speak up in meetings if you don't have psychological safety, or the team is larger, or maybe they're new members, but they will share with you live voting. And then as a leader, you can again address it. Whew. I'm trying, I know I'm like, oh, it's already 20 minutes, but I hope that you found value in this. If you want to experience an inclusive, engaging workshop, reach out to us. We're your team at Civility Partners. There are a lot of us, but our CEO, Catherine Matthijs, Rebecca is on our team, who is also phenomenal and amazing. I'm Anya Soto. I do design and training delivery. Please invite us. We'll be happy to train your leaders, work with your leadership team on building trust, psychological safety. We do a lot of diversity and inclusion training when it comes to unconscious bias and how to be an upstander and how to intervene. We deliver manager trainings for supervisors and leaders, again, how to give feedback, how to do performance management, anything you want, we got it. Thank you for joining me live. Thank you for your comments. If you will be watching the recording, send us an email, send us a message. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram. Suzanne said this was great. Thank you. Be reaching out. Thank you. So yeah, and I hope to see your comments, and I'll check back in. I appreciate you guys, and see you in a couple of weeks on our next episode of Don't Be Bad Boss with Anya Soto.